Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 5 of What If Deku Had a Blazer Quirk. Also check out the playlists that I have created on this channel. But hope you guys enjoy. Izuku woke up early and wanted to go on a run. But he knew if he did, Recovery Girl would scold him. He looked out the window and fought back to the fight against the Nomu. The black-haired boy then clenched his hand into a fist. I was only able to injure the thing because of Ito Shura. Even then it was able to regenerate when I cut it in half. But I can't dwell on the past now, I have to keep moving forward to become the strongest. He was about to look away from the window, but he noticed someone new walking into the dorms. I haven't seen her around. She is probably the one Nizu told me about, but I should probably start getting ready. I want to see if Recovery Girl is available. He then glanced at his alarm clock and it read 6:30. Alright, I hope she is there. After he said that, he got ready into his school uniform and made his way over to her office. Once he got to said office, he knocked to make sure if she was there, and sure enough she was. She told him to come in and he did just that. Once he entered, he saw the heroine typing on her computer. She turned around and noticed Izuku. I didn't expect you to come so early. Well, just sit down for now, I'll do a few tests, and you should be good to go. Izuku nodded and did as he was told. Our protagonist looked at the floor. I need to get stronger if I hope to win against something like that. I could ask Todoroki to help me, but I don't know if he would accept. Well, I will just ask him. He then glanced at the heroine, who was back on her computer. Alright, it looks like your arm is fine now. Wait, you're done with the tests already? Yes, you were muttering to yourself, and I told you it would only be a few tests. But don't do anything reckless or else I'm going to have to put another cast on you. She then took off the cast and asked him to move his arm around. Izuku did just that and his arm felt normal. Does it hurt? No, it doesn't, thank you. It's fine, just don't be reckless. Thanks again. As he says this, he walked out of her office. But now we skip to when they got into class. Aizawa walked in and looked around. Alright, good, you're all seated. Well, I have two things to say. One is that your fight isn't over yet. That made the students all tense up, with Kirishima asking if there's going to be more villains. And Mineta spoke up as well. Are we going to have to go through that again? But before they could say more, Aizawa cut them all off. Alright, stop with all these questions. No, it isn't going to be more villains. This is about the sports festival. It is upcoming and you all will participate. He then continues, pro heroes throughout Japan will be watching, so try to get noticed and everyone should try their best. Izuku then looks over at the door. He saw the pink-haired girl from earlier peeking into their classroom. As for the second thing I want to discuss with you all, Shota spoke up once again. You may come in now. After he said this, the pink-haired girl walked into their classroom. This is Stella Vermilion. She will be joining us from today onward. With the pink-haired girl waving at the class and saying hello. But anyways, Aizawa continues, does anyone have any questions? He then glances at the class to see their reactions, which varied. That's when Tenya raised his hand up and spoke. Sir, why is there a new student when school already started? Before Aizawa could respond, that's when Mineta spoke up. The hero course is the best. Now having a tick mark, Aizawa activates his quirk. All of you guys calm down. That in turn made the whole class calm down and Aizawa spoke up once again. Alright, as for your question, she got a special recommendation and that's all I'm able to say on this matter. He then glanced to the pink-haired girl. Alright Stella, there is an open seat next to Kurogane, go sit next to him. Izuku then raised his hand and she walked over to him and took the seat beside him. They then continued through class as normal, and after the fourth period of modern literature, the class leaves for lunch. Izuku walked up to the half and half boy and spoke. Hey Todoroki, do you want to train together after school? Todoroki looked over at Izuku and nodded. But what about your injuries? He then glanced at Izuku's arm. In response, Izuku lifted his arm up and waved it around. See, it's good as new, they fixed it right up. Todoroki nodded, and that's when Stella walked up to Izuku. She then spoke, hey Kurogane, can you show me around the school, since I'm new and all. Izuku smiled and agreed. He then looked over at Todoroki, who was walking away but had his thumbs up. He then looked over at Stella, who was now staring at him. Alright, well, let's go show you around. Stella agreed and followed Izuku around the campus. So Izuku spoke up. What made you want to come to UA? It had been my dream to become a hero, Stella replied. You can't help for what you long for. Well, that is true, but I'm surprised you were able to come here once the semester already started. She looked over at Izuku. I was planning to go to a different hero school, considering this one was away from my own country. Izuku looked surprised, but he stood quiet to let her continue. But UA is the best hero school in Japan, well, maybe even the world. She then smiled. Why don't we train together during the sports festival? Sure thing, Vermilion-san. Why don't you just call me Stella? I'm used to people calling me my first name anyways. Then call me Izuku if you want me to call you Stella. Alright Izuku, you have a deal. The two then heard the bell to go back to class. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to show you around that much. But Stella spoke up. It's okay, I enjoyed our chat. I enjoyed our chat as well, and along with meeting you. That made the pink-haired girl blush, and the two walked over to their classroom. Once they made it into said classroom, however, that's when you can hear the Chimera's voice over the intercoms. Izuku Kurogane, can you come to my office? Said boy then glanced at his teacher, and Aizawa just shrugged, and Izuku made his way to Nizu's office. Once he was in front of the office, that's when Nizu spoke. Come in, Kurogane, and not a moment afterward Izuku walked into his office. He then offered Izuku tea, but he declined and looked over to his side. There he saw a detective along with All Might. So what is this all about? Principal Izuku spoke up. Nizu just sipped his tea and gestured to the detective to speak. Alright young Kurogane, we wanted to get your point of view of what occurred during the USJ. Izuku nodded but was confused. Don't they have cameras that recorded everything? He then glanced at Nizu. Nizu spoke up. Yes we do, but the villains made it a point to try and capture you, so we wanted to know things from your perspective. Izuku nodded and told the three in the room what he went through and what he did. Which is cut off two of the villains' hands and fought alongside Aizawa. After they got all of the information they needed, Nizu looked over at Izuku. Well, thank you for the information, you may go back to class now. Izuku nodded and got up. And not a moment afterward he left their office. All Might then glanced at Nizu. Do you think they will be attacking again during the sports festival? However, the Chimera shook his head. No, I doubt they would attack us. Besides, security is going to be tripled this year, and most, if not all, of the top pro heroes will be here if they do decide to attack. He then looked at the picture of Izuku and sighed. But back with said protagonist, he now made it back into class. Favorite problem child, go back to your seat. They then continued with the lesson, and Izuku looked out the window, all the while thinking, I will do my best and prove my strength. The class finished not a moment afterward, and Izuku glanced to Shoto, who was packing his things. He walked over to the half and half boy. Todoroki, let's get permission from Aizawa for the training ground. Said boy agreed, and the two walked over to Aizawa. And in the same moment Bakugo opened up the door of the classroom but shouted, move it, extras, at all of the students that were standing in front of their classroom. Tenya then spoke up behind him, you can't go around calling people extras. Stella then walked over next to Achiko and got her attention. Is it always like this around here? Achiko just shook her head no, but looked back towards the crowd. However, Kirishima spoke up, but why are they in front of our class? Bakugo snarled and responded, they are all scouting the competition. He then lit a small explosion which made some of them back away. Now move it, this is what a future pro looks like. A purple-haired boy then went in front of the crowd and stared at Bakugo. If Class 1A is this arrogant, then you wouldn't mind if one of us steals your spot in the hero course, right? Bakugo was going to respond, but that's when Todoroki and Izuku walked past him going towards the crowd. With Izuku speaking up, listen, save it for the sports festival. The two then walked past the crowd and left everyone surprised. Todoroki then glanced at Izuku but just followed him to the training ground. Once the two got to the training ground, they went into the changing rooms first and changed into their PE uniforms. They then walked out into Gym Gamma, now being across from one another. Izuku started to stretch and Todoroki did the same. Alright, Izuku spoke. come to me in Tetsu. He looked over at Todoroki, who was now in a stance of his own. So how do you say we do this? Todoroki responded with let's put a timer for 15 minutes then take a break. Alright, he then brought his phone out and set the timer. Izuku then put his phone down to the side and pointed his blade at Todoroki. Alright, let's do this. He rushed forward towards the half and half boy, who in response sent ice shards towards Izuku and froze the ground. But Izuku moved one hand off from his blade towards the ice and stopped it, which surprised Todoroki. He then took advantage of that and shouted, "Seventh Secret Sword Reiku!" and blitzed towards Todoroki and took a swing at him. But said boy was able to dodge out the way and send a massive ice attack towards Izuku, with Todoroki now speaking up, "I didn't know you have two quirks as well." He then activated his left side and flames appeared. Izuku grinned and got into another stance. "Well, no one really asked, but I can copy quirks." The black-haired boy then rushed towards Todoroki once again and cut any ice shards that were sent his way. But he dodged out of the way from the flame attacks or just used Whirlwind's quirk to redirect the flames. Now that I think about it, isn't that quirk the villain from the video and the one that attacked us at the USJ? Izuku then appeared at his side and punched Todoroki on the side of his face, which sent the boy flying back to the end of the room. Yes, I got it from him then and I got used to this quirk, but we should take this more seriously. He then got into another stance. Todoroki nodded and got up. Alright, he then stomped his foot to the ground and not a moment after ice got launched towards Izuku. All the while his left side lit up once again, with him now moving his hand forward towards our protagonist. Izuku then shouted Edo Shura and rushed forward towards Todoroki. With said boy launching his flames after he launched his ice and shouted Flash Freeze Heat Wave. And Izuku shouted First Secret Sword Saijiki. Both of the attacks collided and made a huge shockwave that could be felt throughout UA. Which made a certain Chimera laugh and made Aizawa get angry. "That is the last time I will let those two train in an enclosed area," he muttered. But back with the two boys, they both moved the rubble out of the way because the building ended up collapsing on them. Izuku then spoke up to Todoroki, "Maybe we should fight in the open from now on." Todoroki nodded, and that's when one of the UA bots come over to them and put out the fire. The two boys then walked back the dorms and got scolded by Aizawa. But once they were done getting lectured, the two went to bed. Now we skip to the next morning. Stella wanted to join Izuku on his morning jogs, with said boy agreeing. Izuku then glanced at her, "Do you want to spar?" She then looked at him and smiled, "You want to spar here?" Izuku nodded and Stella shouted, "Serve me Levitian." After she said this, an inferno of flames appeared and she then grabbed her blade and rushed towards Izuku. Izuku got into a stance and shouted, "Come to me in Tetsu." And not a moment afterward Stella took a swing towards Izuku, who dodged out the way. But it left a flaming crater from where he dodged. Stella then spoke up, "Good thing you dodged, my dragon breath burns at 3000 degrees." She then rushed towards Izuku. However, our protagonist just smirked and lifted his hand up and sent projectiles towards Stella. But said girl was able to dodge out the way, with her thinking, does he have two quirks? She then pointed her blade at him, "You're pretty good at fending off my attacks." Izuku then rushed forward and she did the same. The two swung at one another, but Stella lost her footing and fell on top of Izuku, with said girl calling back her sword and got off from him. All the while blushing, "I'm sorry, I lost my footing and I ended up falling onto you." However, Izuku responded with a blush of his own, "It's okay, that was an accident, but we should probably finish up our jog." Stella agreed. Now we skip to 2 weeks later. Class 1A finished their training and Izuku continued to train with Stella and Todoroki. But now they were in the waiting rooms. Our protagonist noted that there is a lot of security. He then clenched his fist, "This will be broadcasted throughout the whole world." His thoughts then got interrupted by President Mick's voice over the intercoms, calling his class over to the front stage next to the other classes. But that is the end of this part. If you enjoyed this part, leave a comment on how this part had came out. Also, I'm sorry that this part is shorter than the other parts one made before. I will try to make it longer in the future. And if you have any what ifs you want me to make, I will try my best.